Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and I'm here to talk about an upcoming turn-based tactical game set in the Warhammer 40K universe, Mechanicus. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend checking out my interview with the devs that I'll be linking in the description below and under the eye at the top right corner of this screen. It's nearly 1.5 hours of gameplay, and quite the deep dive from an information standpoint. Out of the long session spawned the idea for this far more condensed video. Just remember that this video is based off of an alpha build, and with that caveat out of the way, let's take a look at the top 10 reasons the Omnissiah will be pleased with Warhammer 40K Mechanicus. The setting. Let's get the obvious one out of the way, shall we? The Warhammer 40K universe is a very deep and compelling universe. Alongside this depth is a great deal of breadth as well, perhaps too much breadth. Games in this universe are typically set around the Imperial Guard, the Space Marines, by which I mean the Ultramarines, some form of Chaos, and maybe the Eldar or Tyranids. Here our protagonists are the Adeptus Mechanicus, a cult-worshipping technology to a somewhat extreme degree, able to convene with the spirits within machines, installing mechanical augments, and out on the hunt for more technology, all while having their own code for what is and isn't considered heresy. As far as I can remember, this faction has never been explored this deeply in a video game. The antagonist is one we've seen a couple times in the past, the almighty Necron, a once great empire that sacrificed their mortality for greed, asleep for millennia, waking up with a vengeance here due to tech priest meddling. They field all sorts of high-tech weaponry, never truly die, and have a gorgeous green glow. If exploring these factions further doesn't intrigue you, then perhaps the time frame will if you are a pre-existing fan of the 40K universe. The game will be bridging the gap between 7th and 8th editions, and as with all Games Workshop licensed games, it's all canonical, and it's actually being written by longtime 40K writer Ben Counter. Unit variety. If you're worried about shortcuts being taken here, you'll be happy to hear that key units from both factions are not only getting representation, they're getting some unique mechanics that will steer your decision-making during engagements. As the Adeptus Mechanicus, you'll of course have Tech Priests as the backbone of your army, and beyond that you'll have access to Servitors, Servo Skulls that perform various tasks, Skitarii of various types, and even Castellan robots and others. On the other side of the field, we're going to see Necron Warriors, Praetorians, Necron Lords, Flayed Ones, Scarabs, Wraiths, Canoptic Spiders, and one mysterious unit that is from the Forge World set. Now that's a lot of really cool additional options, and either way we're seeing a fair bit of variety, and each one of these units have their own flair, especially when it comes to the enemies who all have various unique mechanics and strategies. Scarabs replenish on certain tiles, Warriors can shove and shoot at the same turn, Flayed Ones chase after the most hurt unit, Necron Lords modify the landscape. There's some really interesting things going on, and I can't wait to see what else the devs have planned. Character customization. The flesh is weak, and all your tech priests start with far too much of it. Not to worry though, this can quickly be fixed. Character customization takes multiple forms in Mechanicus, and at the most basic level, you can rename your tech priests, and you can also customize their color schemes, a welcome addition to any Warhammer game in my opinion. On top of that, you can add a multitude of weapons, servo skull systems, healing arms, and mechadendrites. These augments are limited at any given time, however, and while you can increase the number of augments any one tech priest can add, you'll want to balance these out among your entire squad. Weapons and equipment can be found during a mission, or you can come across blueprints or STCs. The former gives you one instance of a piece of equipment, while the latter lets you manufacture and 3D print multiple instances for your entire squad. Be careful though, you'll be balancing the use of the plentiful data resource and the much rarer Blackstone resource. And on the topic of resources, XP plays another key role as you try to level your tech priests up, working down one or multiple of these skill paths. Each of these classes represents a different role, and as you unlock steps you can also unlock various body parts to equip on the tech priest, giving various stat buffs while also greatly changing the appearance. Naturally, you can mix and match between the classes to make the specific character you want to make, both visually and functionally speaking. Death is not an option. Mechanicus is a game on a timeline. Pressing the wrong button has triggered the awakening process of the terrifying Necron tomb, and you only have a handful of actions you can take before the endgame is triggered. There is no time to falter, and there is no room for death. If you're the type to get very attached to characters and need days of mourning to get over losses, you'll be pleased to know that death in missions only costs some XP, but allows your tech priest to survive. Death is not an option, it merely changes how you progress. Failure works in a similar way. Failing a mission will serve as a setback, but you won't find yourself forced to redo it. You will have to move on, despite the lost information or missed opportunity the mission may have presented. Story-driven game. Mechanicus puts story at the forefront, and as you progress through the storyline, you'll find yourself at one of 4.5 endings. What the 0.5 might mean is unknown, but the variety of endings is the result of a variety of ways to progress your storyline. With different tech priests from different Forge worlds, with different ethical boundaries giving you assignments, your decisions of who to listen to will determine how the story moves forward. This is especially true because missions are on a timeline as per the setting. Some missions will only be available for a certain number of deployments, meaning you won't be able to go back to them after you've completed a certain number of other missions. These storylines will all throw you against the Necron, and while some will be clean and heresy-free, others might see you dabbling in Xenos tech and heretical solutions. As I've stated before, writer Ben Counter is involved, and the game currently sits at about 100,000 words. A pretty hefty script. Multiple long playthroughs. One of my major concerns was the length of the game, especially if story-driven. More than length, I was concerned about the replayability factor and how often one can revisit the game. The answers I received were all promising. Not only are there the aforementioned 4.5 endings to pursue, but limitations in resources and timelines mean that you won't be able to complete everything you want to every time you play. Multiple interesting missions might come up at the same time, leading you down branching paths, forcing you to play multiple times to really see and experience everything. And each of these playthroughs is no short affair either. On average, a single playthrough where you don't explore everything might clock anywhere between 40 and 60 hours. A really quick playthrough might come in as short as 20 hours, but add on top of that the fact that you'll want to explore various strategies, pursue alternate classes, and possibly attempt flawless runs. It sounds like this game will take all your time if you let it. With about 52 missions or so to play, but only a maximum of 30 per playthrough, you will need to play at least twice to see everything, and I imagine even more often because of how missions lock up over time if they're not done in time. And it helps to know that there are a variety of mission types as well. Not every engagement is a simple head-to-head battle. Some have you trying to get from point A to point B while being attacked. Others have you holding off waves, and I imagine there are many more variants as well. Unique mechanics in the genre. This is a big one. Often it feels like the Warhammer license simply gets bolted onto a game that didn't otherwise consider the setting. We see gameplay that is minimally considerate of the universe, and mechanics that have been rinsed and repeated many times. It's very easy to see how one can compare Mechanicus to games like XCOM, but apart from a very surface-level similarity that exists across all games in this subgenre, Mechanicus explores some unique approaches. On the simple side of things, we've got the canticles that are just buffs that are unlocked by performing various deeds and applied per mission based on what your needs are. Same goes for customization. We've seen customization in these games before, obviously, but Mechanicus takes a suitably unique approach to it with a consideration for augmentation limits, how slots work, and even how leveling up across classes works. It all fits the Adeptus Mechanicus way. Where we start to get really interesting is at this added level between the hub world and the tactical layer. This tomb exploration layer, if you will, has you exploring the area of the mission, possibly engaging in side story or side exploration bits that give you various buffs, debuffs, loot, and gear, and at the same time this layer is what triggers potential engagements, and is also the layer in which the mission difficulty is adjusted. As you go around exploring, the difficulty gauge will fill up and go higher and higher, adding more buffs to the enemy. You're trading the risk of a tough fight against the reward of loot and XP. This layer also ties the mission together. This means that anything that happens in one room, such as a battle, will have its effects carry over for the rest of the mission. This includes, for example, any damage you've taken. Ultimately, when you engage in battle, or enter an arena, as the devs call it, there are a few big changes as well. For one, your order of operations are not limited. You can move one tile at a time, multiple times, on one character. You can move, shoot, and then move again, ensuring you have ideal positioning. You can move, shoot, use an ability, move, shoot again. You can, well, you get the idea. The balancing act here is that some of the more heavy-duty weapons and pieces of equipment and moving beyond your regular movement range cost cognition points. These points are limited, and if you use them all up, you'll find yourself limited in movement and damage output. Thankfully, you're able to generate cognition points either through abilities, or by collecting them off fallen foes, or by collecting them from various points on the map. Your tech priests and your servo skulls can both do this, and this just adds another layer of resource management, except this time on the tactical map. Yet another layer of difference is the angle of knowledge being power. No matter how many times you've faced off against a foe, you cannot know its current health or armor stats unless you get close enough, or you send a servo skull to scout them out. Sometimes enemies are not at full health when they spawn, for example. This is by virtue of the fact that They are a millennia-old metallic being, and they're just waking up. I'm curious to see how many surprises will be lurking in the shadows, as the true potential and demand for the scouting will be increased if there are a multitude of unknowns before you scout. As of now, it's just health and armor stats, very important of course, for target selection. Then there's the inclusion of the machine spirit, basically a way to bring in some randomness when you're overusing your equipment. Working within the bounds of the lore, each piece of technology has a machine spirit, and you can anger it, meaning it won't cooperate. It might blow up in your hands, it might not fire, it might shoot allies, anything can happen. So, as you can see, Mechanicus isn't just a reskin of an existing game. There's some serious thought being put into how this game can be a fairly different experience to ones that might seem similar, and all of that thought is coming from the perspective of people who are interested in the lore and in the universe, trying to make it come to life under these mechanics. Always hit, sometimes hurt. Another big change, one deserving of its own title, is how hitting works. Cover being split into full or half is a thing of the past. Things in Mechanicus are either in line of sight or they're not. This changes tactical approaches quite a bit, especially when you add on the fact that attacks always land. That's right, every attack, melee or ranged, has a 100% hit chance. That means the only range is in the damage output of the weapon, and apart from that, it's just a matter of damage output versus armor to determine how an attack goes. This system applies to attacks of opportunity as well. That is to say, when you're in melee range of enemies and try to disengage, any enemies within melee range get a free, guaranteed hit. This ties in to earlier mentions of movement. The desire to get line of sight on the enemy and immediately break it, in some cases, becomes a bit of a tactical driving force, for example. So you can see how the approach here is very different from other games in the genre as well. Aesthetic. I'm very big on visuals, and though graphics are not the be-all and end-all of a game, I think it's an important consideration when getting excited for one, especially one set in the Warhammer worlds. Warhammer, Fantasy, and 40K have some extremely interesting art, and it is often poorly represented in video games and less than stellar full CG films centered around the Ultramarines. You guys know what I'm talking about. Mechanicus, fortunately, gives us some fantastic visuals. The aesthetic, especially when in combat, departs slightly from an overly gritty look and feel, adding a ton of character with good use of color and form. We're not going ultra-realistic here, but we're not cartoony either. Especially when looking at the VFX, you'll see just how vibrant and interesting things are to look at. I couldn't pinpoint it during my interview, but it gives me a bit of a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe as far as visuals go. Bright, vibrant, but deadly. I'm personally a fan of this visual style as it allows for some more fun across the board without breaking immersion. The animations are equally entertaining. The Castellan robot spinning in circles, the flayed ones doing this stuff, it's great. But outside of the tactical scenarios, the hub world and the exploration layer take on a slightly different approach. The hub has this interesting chromatic aberration that makes it feel like we're watching through a terrible screen, as one might do in this universe, and it looks fairly realistic as well. You know, coming from this top-down angle, everything is a little dark and gritty and moody. And when we're in the exploration mode, we zoom right into this area here and we get this great hollow effect. Another great touch is in the in-game cinematic camera. You can zoom in and get a nice angle and get great shallow depth of field effects, and this can work during real-time animations as well, allowing you to capture some great shots and see units that you might know and love from tabletop in a way you've never seen them before. The UI and all looks great as well, but from the interview we've heard that some things are being tweaked, but what we've seen so far looks very promising. This isn't lazy UI design, it's all treated nicely and matches the overall aesthetics and theme of the game. DLC plans. This is a bit of a weird one, it's a bit of a short one, but it's one worth considering nowadays. Some games release with an entire DLC path planned for, 2 years to come, and season passes, while others hope to release DLC with success. Mechanicus falls into the latter category. This means that if the game does well, the developers will be able to work on some more missions, settings, and units. With a great deal of playtime already available in the base game, I don't feel like this is a matter of cut content being saved for later as a cash grab. I think it's important to highlight the DLC plan because it does suggest to me that the devs have not bit off more than they could chew, but also that they're eager to do more as soon as it's viable. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick overview of what's exciting about Warhammer 40K Mechanicus. The game releases in November, and you can watch my full interview at the link provided in the description below for a lot more in-depth information and gameplay as well. Let me know down below if you guys are interested in the game, and if you have any questions you'd like me to seek the answers out to in the near future as well. As always, make sure you subscribe for more coverage of strategy and tactical games, and a massive thanks to my patrons for supporting this channel on a month-to-month basis, helping keep it alive and running. And a big thanks to all of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.